An 8-year-old girl watched silently as a passenger was humiliated at an airport gate. No one stepped in. No one questioned it. Until the child calmly walked forward and asked one simple question that made the entire airport freeze. Within minutes, security was called. Within hours, the airline faced global backlash. And within weeks, one little girl changed company policy forever. Because that child wasn't just a passenger. She was the one person in the airport who had the power to rewrite the rules. The airport was loud, not just busy, but alive with motion and noise. Rolling suitcases rattled across polished marble floors like constant waves crashing against stone. Overhead speakers echoed, overlapping boarding announcements in calm, robotic tones. The scent of fresh coffee drifted through crowded walkways as travelers hurried past each other. Some laughing, some stressed, others half asleep after long late. Screens flickered with departure times. Flight attendants walked with professional precision. Business travelers tapped quickly on laptops. While families struggled to keep children from wandering too far, it was just another ordinary morning. At Atlanta International Airport, one of the busiest travel hubs in the world, thousands of people were moving through it. Without thinking, without noticing each other, without realizing that within the next few minutes, something would happen that would stop an entire terminal in its tracks. At Gate 47, passengers had begun, forming a neat boarding line for a highly anticipated direct flight to London. The flight was nearly full, mostly business class and premium travelers. Conversations buzzed about meetings, vacations, and international conferences waiting on the other side of the ocean. Among the passengers stood a woman who blended quietly into the line, yet somehow carried herself with natural grace and quiet strength. Her name was Angela Brooks. Angela was in her early 40s, with warm brown skin and elegant posture that spoke of discipline and confidence built over many years. She wore a navy blue tailored blazer paired with cream slacks, her outfit professional, yet simple. Her hair was styled neatly into a smooth, low bun, and she carried a structured leather handbag resting comfortably on her shoulder. In her hands, she carefully held her passport and boarding pass, pressing them lightly together as if protecting something important. Angela wasn't just traveling for leisure. She was heading to London for a global nonprofit conference where she was scheduled to present a project she had spent nearly 3 years building, a scholarship program supporting underprivileged girls entering STEM education. This trip meant everything to her. She had rehearsed her presentation dozens of times. She had saved and planned carefully. She had even called her teenage daughter the night before, promising to bring back souvenirs and stories about the trip. She had earned this moment. When her boarding group was announced, Angela stepped forward calmly. She moved with patience, waiting her turn in line, occasionally glancing around at other passengers as she slowly approached the gate counter. Behind the counter stood the airline gate agent. Her name tag read, Linda Carter. Linda looked sharp, polished, and perfectly uniformed. Her navy airline jacket was crisp. Her hair was pulled into a tight professional bun. Her makeup was flawless, and her posture carried the unmistakable air of someone who believed she was fully in control of her environment. But there was something else about her. Something subtle. Something uncomfortable. It was the faint smirk resting at the corner of her lips, the kind that made several passengers exchange glances earlier that morning when interacting with her. Angela reached the front of the line and offered a warm, respectful smile. "Good morning," she said kindly. Linda barely looked up. Her fingers continued tapping across her terminal screen as if Angela's greeting had never existed. After a brief moment, she extended her hand mechanically. "Boarding pass," she said flatly. Angela handed it over, gently. Still maintaining her polite expression, Linda scanned the barcode. The machine beeped. Then Linda paused. It was a small pause, barely noticeable to most people. But Angela noticed. Linda's eyebrows lifted slightly as she stared at her screen. Her eyes narrowed, scanning information only she could see. Then slowly, that smirk appeared. Subtle but unmistakable. "I'm going to need you to step aside," Linda said, her voice calm but cold. Angela blinked, confused by the sudden change in tone. "I'm sorry, is there a problem?" she asked politely. Linda leaned back slightly and crossed her arms, her posture shifting from professional to dismissive. "Your ticket appears." She paused briefly, choosing her words carefully. "Questionable." Angela felt her stomach tighten slightly. "I don't understand," she replied gently. "I purchased my ticket directly through the airline's website." Linda didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked Angela up and down, slowly. Her blazer, her shoes, her handbag, her posture, analyzing her in a way that felt deeply uncomfortable. "We need to verify whether you're authorized to board," Linda finally said. Passengers standing behind Angela began whispering quietly. Some leaned slightly to get a better view. Others pulled out their phones subtly, sensing tension building. Angela felt heat rising in her chest. But she kept her voice calm. I checked in online last night, she explained carefully. I received confirmation emails and seat assignment details. Linda shrugged casually. People say that all the time, she replied without emotion. The words landed harder than Angela expected. She suddenly became aware of how many eyes were turning toward her. The professional confidence she carried moments ago began battling against the creeping feeling of public embarrassment. Still, Angela remained composed. Could you please tell me exactly what is wrong with my ticket? She asked politely. Linda leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice, but not low enough to prevent nearby passengers from hearing. Look, Linda said slowly. Flights like this are very expensive. Sometimes people attempt to bypass systems or use questionable payment methods. The implication hung heavily in the air. Angela felt it instantly. Her heart skipped. Her expression stiffened just slightly. Though she fought to remain calm, she had experienced moments like this before in her life. Subtle judgments, disguised as procedure. Suspicion hidden behind polite language. But this moment felt sharper, more public, more humiliating. I assure you, Angela said, her voice steady but quieter now. My ticket is legitimate. Linda didn't respond. Instead, she turned back toward her computer screen, tapping slowly as if Angela had become an inconvenience she needed to process rather than a customer she needed to help. Please step aside while we verify. Linda repeated firmly, already gesturing toward the side of the boarding lane. Angela hesitated for just a second. That second felt long, heavy, but she stepped aside anyway, clutching her boarding pass tighter in her hands. She stood near the edge of the gate area, trying to appear calm, while waves of embarrassment and confusion washed through her chest. Passengers continued boarding behind her. Beep. Boarding passes scanned successfully, one after another. Angela watched as a businessman, wearing a gray suit, stepped forward from the same boarding group she belonged to. He smiled briefly at Linda, handed over his pass, and within seconds he was waved through without question. Angela swallowed slowly. Her eyes dropped toward her boarding pass as if searching for something she might have missed. That was when something else happened. Across the gate, standing near the seating area, someone had been watching everything unfold from the very beginning. A small figure, a child, an 8-year-old girl, wearing a soft, pink, formal coat tailored elegantly around her shoulders. Her posture was straight, her chin slightly raised. Her expression unusually focused for someone her age. Her name was Zara Kingston. She stood quietly beside two adults, her personal assistant and a security escort, but her attention was locked entirely on Angela. Her sharp eyes studied every movement, every word, every expression. Zara had noticed how Angela smiled politely. She had noticed how Linda never returned that smile. She had noticed the subtle change in tone, and she had definitely noticed the moment Angela was asked to step aside while others continued boarding without hesitation. Zara's fingers tightened slightly around the tablet she was holding. Her small eyebrows lowered thoughtfully. Something about the situation didn't feel right to her? Not at all. She watched Angela standing alone near the glass windows, trying to remain composed while quietly battling humiliation in front of strangers. Zara's gaze shifted back toward the gate counter, where Linda continued scanning boarding passes as if nothing unusual had happened. Passengers walked past Angela without making eye contact. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked curious. Most simply avoided getting involved. Zara inhaled slowly. Her parents had always told her one thing, repeatedly. Something she remembered in moments when she saw unfairness. If you see someone being treated wrong, and you stay silent, you become part of the problem. Zara's eyes returned to Angela again. And this time, something inside her made a decision. A decision that would change not just Angela's day, but the entire airport's morning. Zara adjusted the sleeves of her pink coat slightly. Then, without saying a word to her assistant, she started walking toward gate 47. Passengers barely noticed the small girl stepping forward until she spoke. Excuse me. Her voice was calm, clear, and surprisingly authoritative for someone so young. Linda glanced down. Annoyance flashed across her face. Yes, boarding is by group. You'll need to wait. Zara ignored the tone. Why are you refusing her boarding? She asked directly, pointing politely toward Angela. Linda sighed. This is airline business, young lady. Please return to your guardian. Zara blinked slowly. She showed you a valid boarding pass. Zara continued. He scanned it. What is the actual problem? Angela stared at Zara, surprised that a child was defending her. Linda straightened. Her ticket requires additional verification. Zara nodded thoughtfully. What verification? Linda hesitated. That information is confidential. Zara turned slightly and looked at Angela. Ma'am, did you purchase your ticket directly through the airline? Yes. Angela answered quietly. Did you receive confirmation emails? Yes. Did you check in online? Yes. Zara nodded again. Then she turned back toward Linda. So, there is no system error, Zara said calmly. You're just delaying. Linda's patience snapped. Listen, this is not a discussion. Step back before I call security. The entire boarding line fell silent. Zara slowly placed her tablet on the counter. Then she spoke words that would change the entire morning. Go ahead, she said calmly. Call them. Linda smirked again. I will, and she picked up the phone. What she didn't realize was who she was about to call security on? Passengers. Barely noticed the small girl stepping forward at first. The boarding line was still moving steadily. Boarding passes continued scanning. Conversations about seat upgrades and overhead luggage. Space filled the air. Flight attendants walked past, carrying tablets and paperwork, preparing the aircraft for departure. 2. Most people, Zara Kingston, looked like just another child walking toward the counter. Until she spoke. Excuse me. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was clear, steady, unexpectedly, commanding for someone. So young. The sound cut through the low chatter surrounding the gate. Several passengers turned their heads instinctively, curious about the confident tone. Coming from a child's voice, behind the counter, Linda Carter barely glanced up at first. Her fingers continued tapping across her keyboard as she prepared to scan the next passenger's boarding pass. She replied without looking directly at Zara. Boarding is by group. You'll need to wait. Her tone carried mild irritation, the same tone she had used with several passengers earlier that morning. But Zara didn't step back. She didn't even react to the dismissive attitude. Instead, she took one small step closer to the counter and repeated her question calmly. What? Are you refusing her boarding? She gestured politely toward Angela, who stood a few feet away, still holding her boarding pass. Tightly in her hands, Angela froze. Her eyes widened slightly as she looked at the child speaking on her behalf. She opened her mouth as if to interrupt, unsure whether to feel grateful or worried about dragging a child into the situation. Linda finally looked down fully at Zara. Annoyance flashed across her face. This is airline business. Young lady, Linda said sharply, please return to your guardian and allow us to continue boarding. A few passengers exchanged glances. Some smiled awkwardly, assuming the child would step away like most would after being corrected by an adult. But Zara remained exactly where she stood. Her expression stayed calm. Passengers barely noticed the small girl stepping forward at first. The boarding line was still moving steadily. Boarding passes continued scanning. Conversations about seat upgrades and overhead luggage space filled the air. Flight attendants walked past, carrying tablets and paperwork, preparing the aircraft for departure. To most people, Zara Kingston looked like just another child walking toward the counter. Until she spoke. Excuse me. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was clear, steady, and unexpectedly commanding for someone. So young? The sound cut through the low chatter surrounding the gate. Several passengers turned their heads instinctively, curious about the confident tone coming from a child's voice. Behind the counter, Linda Carter barely glanced up at first. Her fingers continued tapping across her keyboard as she prepared to scan the next passenger's boarding pass. She replied without looking directly at Zara. Boarding is by group. You'll need to wait. Her tone carried mild irritation, the same tone she had used with several passengers earlier that morning. But Zara didn't step back. She didn't even react to the dismissive attitude. Instead, she took one small step closer to the counter and repeated her question calmly. What? Are you refusing her boarding? She gestured politely toward Angela, who stood a few feet away, still holding her boarding pass. Tightly in her hands, Angela froze. Her eyes widened slightly as she looked at the child speaking on her behalf. She opened her mouth as if to interrupt, unsure whether to feel grateful or worried about dragging a child into the situation. Linda finally looked down fully at Zara. Annoyance flashed across her face. This is airline business. Young lady, Linda said sharply, please return to your guardian and allow us to continue boarding. A few passengers exchanged glances. Some smiled awkwardly, assuming the child would step away like most would after being corrected by an adult. But Zara remained exactly where she stood. Her expression stayed calm, focused, unshaken, double quotes. She showed you a valid boarding pass. Zara continued politely. You scanned it. What is the actual problem? Linda's posture stiffened slightly. She straightened her shoulders, clearly irritated that the conversation wasn't ending. Her ticket requires additional verification, Linda replied, her voice colder now. Zara nodded slowly, as if processing new information. What verification? She asked. Linda hesitated for just a second. That information is confidential, she said quickly. Zara blinked once. Then she turned slightly toward Angela, maintaining her respectful tone. Ma'am, Did you purchase your ticket directly through the airline? Zara asked. Angela hesitated briefly, surprised by the professionalism in the girl's voice. Yes, Angela answered softly. Did you receive confirmation emails after purchase? Yes. Did you check in online before arriving at the airport? Yes, Angela repeated, her voice growing slightly steadier now. Zara nodded once more, turning back toward Linda. So, there is no system error, Zara said calmly. You're just delaying her. A ripple of quiet murmurs spread through the boarding line. Several passengers leaned closer, sensing tension building. Some airline staff standing nearby glanced toward the counter, trying to determine whether they should intervene. Linda's patience finally snapped. Listen, she said sharply, leaning forward slightly. This is not a discussion. Step back before I call security. The words echoed louder than expected. The boarding line fell completely silent. Angela's breath caught slightly. Several passengers exchanged shocked looks, unsure whether they were witnessing discipline or escalation. Zara remained still. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. Instead, she slowly lifted her tablet from under her arm and placed it carefully on the counter. The soft tap of glass against the polished surface sounded louder than it should have in the sudden silence. Then she looked directly at Linda, her expression calm, her voice steady. Go ahead, she said quietly. Call them. Linda blinked. The confidence in Zara's tone caught her off guard for a split second, but the moment passed quickly, replaced by a familiar smirk. I will, Linda replied. She reached toward the desk phone beside her keyboard and picked it up confidently. Her fingers moved quickly, dialing internal airport security services. Passengers around the gate shifted uncomfortably. Some whispered, others discreetly pulled out their phones, sensing that something unusual was unfolding. Angela stepped closer to Zara, lowering her voice. You don't have to do this, Angela whispered gently. I don't want you getting into trouble. Zara glanced up at her briefly and offered a small, reassuring smile. It's okay, Zara said quietly. You deserve to board your flight. Angela felt the emotion rise unexpectedly in her chest. She nodded slowly, unsure what to say. Across the gate area, Alina and Marcus had already begun walking toward the counter, their expressions professional but alert. Alina watched Zara carefully, understanding exactly what was happening. Marcus maintained his distance but scanned the surrounding passengers with trained vigilance. Lina spoke into the phone with controlled authority. Yes, signee security. Assistance at gate 47, she said firmly. We have passengers interfering with boarding operations, she said quickly. I've asked them to step away multiple times. The officers turned towards Zara for a brief moment. Their expressions remained neutral. Then, recognition flashed across one officer's face. His posture straightened. Instantly, he leaned slightly toward his partner and whispered something under his breath. The second officer blinked, then looked at Zara again more carefully. His eyes widened slightly before he quickly composed himself. Passengers standing nearby noticed the sudden shift in body language. The first officer stepped forward respectfully. Miss Kingston, he said. The words landed like a shockwave. Across the silent gate, several passengers gasped softly. Angela blinked in confusion, glancing down at Zara with surprise. Linda frowned. Do you know her? Linda asked, her voice slightly uncertain now. The officer nodded carefully, maintaining professional composure. Yes, ma'am, he said. She is a VIP passenger under executive protection clearance. Linda's smirk faded instantly. Color drained slowly from her face. Zara folded her hands politely on the counter. I requested security because this passenger, she said calmly, gesturing toward Angela, is being denied boarding without explanation. Angela's breath caught again, overwhelmed by the situation unfolding around her. The second officer stepped forward and turned toward Linda. Ma'am, he said firmly, can you explain the reason for the boarding denial? Linda hesitated. Suspected ticket irregularities, she said slowly. The officer extended his hand toward Angela. May I see your boarding pass, ma'am? He asked respectfully. Angela handed it over, her hands trembling slightly. The officer scanned the boarding pass using his handheld device. A green confirmation light flashed instantly. He looked back toward Linda. Ticket is valid, he said. Clearly, a wave of murmurs spread through the crowd. Passengers exchanged stunned looks. Some began whispering louder. Now, realizing the situation had shifted dramatically, Zara remained completely calm. She gently tapped her tablet screen once, activating several documents. But she said nothing. She simply watched Linda and waited. Because the confrontation was only just beginning. Within minutes, airport security arrived. The atmosphere at Gate 47 had already transformed from routine boarding to tense public spectacle. Passengers who had previously been focused on luggage, seat assignments, and flight Schedules now stood silently watching the unfolding situation. Even airline staff from nearby gates began glancing toward the commotion. Sensing something serious was happening, two uniformed airport security officers walked toward the counter. With calm, professional precision, their footsteps echoed faintly across the polished marble floor, each step adding to the growing tension in the air. The first officer stepped forward slightly. "What seems to be the issue here?" he asked, his voice measured and composed. Linda Carter immediately straightened her posture, clearly eager to regain control of the situation. She gestured sharply toward Zara and Angela. "These passengers are interfering with boarding operations," she said quickly, her tone defensive but confident. "I've asked them multiple times to step aside so we can continue processing passengers." The officer nodded slightly and turned toward Zara. For a brief moment, his expression remained neutral. Then he paused. His eyes narrowed slightly as recognition sparked across his face. His body language changed almost instantly. His posture stiffened, his shoulders straightened, and his entire demeanor shifted from routine response to careful formality. He leaned slightly toward his partner and whispered quietly. His partner's expression shifted as well. His eyes widened briefly before he quickly composed himself, adjusting his stance respectfully. Both officers then stood noticeably straighter. "Miss Kingston," one of them said respectfully, lowering his head slightly in acknowledgement. The words landed like thunder in the silent boarding area. Passengers nearby gasped quietly. Several people turned toward Zara again, now studying the small girl in the pink coat with completely different expressions. Curiosity, replaced by shock and realization. Angela blinked rapidly, her eyes moving from the officer to Zara in stunned confusion. Linda frowned deeply, clearly unsettled by the sudden change in tone. "Do you know her?" Linda asked, her voice slightly strained now. The officer nodded carefully, maintaining professional composure. "Yes, ma'am," he said calmly. "She is a VIP passenger under executive protection status." Linda's face drained of color almost instantly. The confident smirk she had worn earlier vanished completely. Her fingers tightened slightly against the counter as uncertainty replaced authority in her posture. Zara folded her hands politely in front of her, her expression calm and composed, almost unnaturally steady for someone her age. "I requested security because this woman," Zara said clearly, gesturing respectfully toward Angela, "is being denied boarding without explanation." Angela's breath caught in her chest. She looked down at Zara with disbelief, emotion rising quickly behind her eyes. The second officer turned toward Linda, his tone now noticeably firmer. "Ma'am, can you explain the reason for the boarding denial?" he asked. Linda swallowed slightly. The confidence in her voice faltered as she tried to respond. "I suspected ticket irregularities," she said, her words slower now, less certain. The officer extended his hand toward Angela respectfully. "May I see your boarding pass, ma'am?" he asked. Angela handed it over carefully, her hands trembling slightly under the weight of the attention surrounding her. The officer scanned the boarding pass, using his handheld verification device. A bright green confirmation light flashed immediately. A clear electronic beep followed. The officer looked back toward Linda. "Ticket is valid," he said firmly. A ripple of loud murmuring spread through the crowd. Several passengers exchanged shocked looks. Others whispered openly now, no longer hiding their reactions. "That means she should have boarded already. Why was she stopped then? This doesn't look good." Angela felt a rush of overwhelming emotion. Her chest tightened as relief, embarrassment, and gratitude collided inside her all at once. Zara, however, remained completely calm. She said nothing. She simply watched. But beside her, Elena Morris stepped forward smoothly, holding her tablet in one hand. Her posture radiated quiet authority as she addressed both the officers and Linda. "I would also like to notify you," Elena said professionally, her voice clear and composed, "that Kingston Global Holdings owns a controlling investment stake in this airline's parent company." The words dropped into the silence like a heavy stone into still water. Linda's mouth opened slightly. Passengers froze. The officers exchanged quick glances, though their posture remained disciplined. "Yes," Elena continued calmly, swiping across her tablet screen and displaying corporate ownership documentation. "And Miss Kingston holds final approval authority for executive personnel review under shareholder governance policy." The silence that followed felt almost surreal. Even the distant sounds of airport announcements seemed to fade into the background. Travelers standing near the gate stared openly now, their attention locked completely on the small girl standing calmly beside the counter. Linda's breathing grew slightly uneven. She opened her mouth as if to respond, but no words came out. Her eyes darted between Zara, Elena, and the security officers as the weight of the revelation settled heavily around her. Zara slowly lifted her gaze and looked directly at Linda. Her eyes were calm, but firm. Your behavior toward this passenger violates company equality and customer dignity policies, Zara said clearly, her voice carrying quiet authority. It also reflects discrimination and abuse of operational authority. Linda tried to speak. Her lips parted slightly, but her voice failed her. Several airline employees standing nearby shifted uncomfortably, clearly realizing they were witnessing something far beyond routine workplace discipline. Zara reached toward her tablet and tapped the screen once. The soft electronic click echoed in the tense silence. Hi, I'm initiating immediate termination review under shareholder compliance protocol, Zara said simply. A wave of gasps moved through the crowd again. Several passengers covered their mouths, in shock. Others whispered rapidly, trying to process what they had just heard. Angela stood frozen, her hand covering her lips as tears began forming in her eyes. Linda shook her head slightly, finally finding her voice. You can't just, she started. Zara raised her hand gently, not aggressively, simply signaling for calm. And until the investigation is completed, Zara continued calmly, you are relieved from active duty, effective immediately. The moment stretched for a heartbeat. Linda's ID badge clipped to her uniform, emitted a soft electronic tone. Beep. The small red light on the badge blinked twice, then turned off completely. Linda stared down at it in disbelief. She tried scanning it against her terminal. Nothing happened. The system access had already been revoked. Passengers gasped again, louder this time. Several people instinctively stepped closer, unable to look away from the unfolding scene. The officer beside Linda cleared his throat gently. Ma'am, going to need you to step away from the boarding terminal, he said respectfully but firmly. Linda's hands trembled slightly as she removed her badge and placed it slowly on the counter. Her earlier confidence had completely dissolved, replaced by stunned silence. Angela covered her mouth fully now, tears sliding quietly down her cheeks. She shook her head slightly, overwhelmed by the sudden reversal of power and justice she had never expected. Zara turned slightly toward her and offered a small, reassuring smile. Behind them, passengers began whispering openly. I can't believe that just happened. That little girl just changed everything. Someone finally stood up. Nearby airline staff stood frozen, uncertain how to respond. Some avoided eye contact entirely, while others watched Zara with deep respect and astonishment. The entire boarding gate had transformed into something far beyond travel logistics. It had become a moment, a statement, a turning point that no one present would ever forget. And standing quietly at the center of it all was an 8-year-old girl, in a pink coat, who had just shaken the authority structure of an entire airline with calm dignity and unwavering courage. Angela Brooks finally boarded the plane, but not before the entire atmosphere at Gate 47 transformed into something no one expected. That morning. The boarding process resumed slowly, but the energy inside the terminal felt completely different now. Passengers who had watched the confrontation unfold were still whispering to each other, some replaying recordings on their phones, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Angela stood near the entrance to the boarding bridge, her boarding pass now scanned successfully, something that should have happened 20 minutes earlier. But she didn't step onto the plane immediately. Instead, she turned around and looked back toward Zara. The small girl stood near the counter, calmly speaking with her assistant, while security officers maintained respectful distance nearby. Despite everything that had just happened, Zara's expression remained peaceful, almost as if she didn't realize the enormous impact of what she had done. Angela felt emotions swell inside her chest. She slowly walked back toward Zara, her heels clicking softly against the floor as passengers stepped aside to give her space. Several people watched quietly, sensing a meaningful moment approaching. When Angela reached Zara, she bent down slightly so she could speak to her at eye level. Thank you, Angela said softly. Her voice trembled slightly as tears shimmered. In her eyes, you didn't have to do that for me. Zara looked at her gently, her expression warm and thoughtful. For a brief moment, she didn't answer. Then she smiled, a small, sincere smile that carried far more maturity than her age suggested. My parents taught me something, Zara said quietly. Angela tilted her head slightly. Curious, what is that? She asked. Zara's eyes softened as she answered. Respect is not optional, she said calmly. It's required. The words hung in the air like a quiet promise. Angela's face tightened as emotion overwhelmed her. Without hesitation, she reached forward and wrapped her arms carefully around Zara, hugging her gently but tightly, as if thanking her not just for the moment, but for restoring something deeper inside her. Zara returned the hug politely, her small hands resting gently on Angela's shoulder. Around them, passengers began clapping. At first, it was just a few people. Then more joined. Within seconds, the entire boarding gate erupted into applause. Some passengers smiled warmly. Others wiped tears from their faces. Deeply moved by the scene unfolding before them, several travelers raised their phones, recording the moment. One woman whispered, "This is going to be everywhere online." Angela stepped back slowly, nodding toward Zara, one last time before walking toward the boarding bridge. As she stepped onto the plane, she paused briefly at the entrance and glanced back once more. Zara stood quietly in the terminal, waving softly. Angela smiled. And then she disappeared down the boarding tunnel, but she carried something far more important than her boarding pass that day. She carried dignity, restored. Within hours, the story exploded across social media. Videos recorded by passengers spread across platforms faster than anyone expected. Clips showing Zara calmly confronting the gate agent, security recognizing her identity, and Angela boarding the flight while passengers applauded began trending worldwide. Hashtags flooded timelines. #Gate47. Justice, #respect is required, #little leader, big impact. Major news outlets picked up the story almost instantly. Headlines appeared across global networks. The day an 8-year-old CEO stood up for justice. Child billionaire challenges airline discrimination. The young leader who changed airport history. Commentators, activists, and business leaders debated the story across television panels and podcasts. Many praised Zara's courage and composure. Others discussed the deeper systemic issues highlighted by the incident. Within 24 hours, the airline released an official public statement. They acknowledged the incident. They issued a formal apology to Angela Brooks, and they announced a full internal investigation into employee conduct and customer equality policies. But the company didn't stop there. Within 1 week, the airline announced mandatory anti-discrimination and customer respect training for all staff worldwide. They also launched a new oversight review board designed to monitor fairness and compliance across customer service departments. The ripple effects of one moment at Gate 47 were spreading across an entire corporate industry. 2 weeks later, the investigation officially concluded. Linda Carter's termination was confirmed publicly. The company cited violation of equality protocols, discriminatory conduct, and abuse of operational authority. The announcement sparked mixed reactions across public opinion, but one thing remained consistent. The story had already become larger than the individuals involved. It had become a symbol, but the most powerful chapter of the story was still unfolding. Several weeks after the airport incident, Kingston Global Holdings scheduled a press conference at their headquarters in New York City. Media outlets from across the country attended. Journalists, corporate analysts, social justice advocates, and aviation industry leaders filled the conference hall. At the center of the stage stood a small podium, and behind it, Zara Kingston, dressed in a soft white formal dress with her signature calm posture. She stood beside her assistant and company executives as cameras flashed continuously. Lilina stepped forward first, addressing the audience professionally. "Today," she announced, "Miss Kingston is proud to launch a new national scholarship initiative designed to expand opportunity and leadership development for young girls interested in aviation, aerospace, and executive leadership careers." Large screens behind the stage illuminated with the program title, "Boarding Without B.A. Arari." The room filled with quiet admiration as Alina explained the program. The initiative would fund flight training, academic scholarships, mentorship programs, and leadership workshops for underprivileged girls across the country, particularly those facing financial or social barriers preventing them from entering aviation careers. The program would also partner with multiple airlines to create internship pathways and pilot training sponsorships. The announcement received immediate standing applause. Then Zara stepped forward to speak. Microphones adjusted slightly to her height as reporters leaned forward attentively. Despite the massive audience and flashing cameras, Zara remained calm, her voice clear and steady. A journalist raised a hand from the front row. "Miss Kingston," he asked respectfully, "why did you step in personally at the airport that day, instead of allowing your staff to handle it?" Zara paused. She looked down briefly, thinking. The room remained completely silent. Then she lifted her gaze and answered in a way that would soon travel across news channels, classrooms, and social media worldwide. "'Cause power isn't about control," she said softly. "It's about making sure doors stay open for everyone." The words spread across the room like electricity. Cameras flashed faster. Journalists scribbled notes quickly. Within hours, the quote went viral across global media platforms, becoming one of the most shared leadership statements of the year. Several days later, Angela Brooks sat comfortably in her living room, watching the press conference replay on her television screen. Her teenage daughter sat beside her, eyes wide with admiration as Zara spoke. Angela smiled quietly. She held a framed photograph on her coffee. Table. A screenshot captured by a passenger showing her and Zara hugging at gate 47. Her daughter glanced toward her. Mom, do you think she knows how many lives she changed? Her daughter asked softly. Angela shook her head gently. Maybe, she said, but I think she did it because she believes it's normal to stand up for people. Angela leaned back against her couch, watching Zara speak confidently about opportunity, fairness, and dignity. Her eyes filled with quiet gratitude. Because that day, at Gate 47, wasn't just about boarding a plane. It was about being seen. It was about being respected. It was about someone choosing courage when silence would have been easier, and it proved something unforgettable. Sometimes, the smallest voice in the room carries the greatest power.